When Jamila Taylor transfers to an elite white academy, she just wants to finish school peacefully. But as Madison and her wealthy clique escalate their systematic bullying, they have no idea they've targeted a state boxing champion with nothing to lose. Now, with her secret exposed, Jamila must decide if her disciplined fists will defend more than just herself. The whispers began before she even reached the main doors. Like ripples in still water, they spread across the pristine courtyard of Westfield Academy. 5 pairs of eyes tracked her movement with surgical precision. Not hostile, not yet, but calculating, assessing, measuring the threat. Madison White, her blonde hair catching the September sunlight, tilted her head slightly toward her companions. "Fresh meat?" she murmured, lips barely moving. "And definitely not our usual flavor." 3 minutes. That's all it took for Jamila Taylor to understand exactly what kind of battlefield she had stepped onto. 3 minutes of walking the carefully manicured pathway toward her new school, feeling the weight of stairs against her dark skin like physical pressure. She'd felt this before, the moment when her presence disrupted someone else's carefully constructed reality, the moment when her existence became a statement she never asked to make. 17 years old, with shoulders squared by discipline rather than defiance, Jamila moved with the controlled economy of motion that came from countless hours in the boxing ring. Her eyes, deep brown and observant, cataloged details others might miss: the subtle shifting of bodies as students created distance, the territorial boundaries between social groups, the invisible lines she was already crossing simply by being there. "You must be Miss Taylor?" The receptionist's voice carried a peculiar hesitation, her eyes flicking between Jamila's face and the computer screen. "Are you here about the financial assistance program?" Jamila kept her expression neutral, the same face she wore when absorbing a jab in the ring. "No, ma'am. I'm a new student. My mother is the new head nurse at Westlake Memorial." "Oh." Too much surprise, too much recalibration in those eyes. "I see. Well, we don't often get new students mid-semester who aren't part of our scholarship initiatives." The unspoken translation hung in the air. "We don't often get black students who can afford our tuition." As Jamila collected her schedule and campus map, the receptionist's smile never reached her eyes. Through the office window, she could see Madison's group still lingering, occasionally glancing toward the administration building, sizing her up, planning. During the orientation tour, Jamila observed what the friendly student guide failed to mention: how the cafeteria had invisible boundaries more rigid than national borders, how students grouped by race and income as instinctively as animals separating by species, how teachers' gazes lingered longer on some faces than others when seeking volunteers. "And we're very proud of our diverse student body," the guide chirped, gesturing toward a wall of photos that told a different story. Tokenism framed in expensive wood. Jamila's fingers briefly touched the small scar above her right eyebrow, a souvenir from her first amateur boxing match 3 years ago. The physical pain had been nothing compared to the lesson it taught. Sometimes the most dangerous hits were the ones you never saw coming. When the tour ended at the student commons, she noticed Madison's group had strategically positioned themselves by the entrance. As Jamila approached, they parted like a curtain, not to let her pass, but to surround her in a loose circle of expensive perfume and practiced smiles. "You must be the new girl," Madison said, voice honey-sweet with poison just beneath the surface. "Welcome to Westfield. We're so glad you've joined us." 5 sets of eyes. 5 predatory smiles. The battlefield revealed itself. Jamila Taylor had stepped into the ring once again, but this time she'd keep her greatest weapon secret. For now. If you're enjoying this story of resilience and standing up to injustice, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives that challenge the status quo. The Westfield Academy cafeteria gleamed with polished surfaces and unwritten rules. Jamila navigated between tables, tray balanced carefully in hands that had wrapped countless boxing bandages. The room subtly hushed as she moved through it, conversations dipping then rising like waves in her wake. An empty table near the windows seemed like safe harbor. Jamila placed her tray down only to hear a throat clearing behind her. A girl with copper hair and expensive highlights stood there, Madison's lieutenant by all appearances. "Sorry," the girl said, not sounding sorry at all. "These seats are reserved." Jamila glanced at the vacant chairs. "For who?" "For whoever we say," the girl replied, inspecting her manicured nails. "I'm Zoe, by the way. Word of advice? Try the tables near the kitchen. That's where the scholarship students usually sit." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Jamila picked up her tray without argument, filing away the interaction in her mental catalog of battles worth fighting. Some punches you dodge, others you counter. Timing was everything. In physical education, Coach Barrett had the new students demonstrate their baseline fitness. Jumping jacks, push-ups, sprints, activities where Jamila's boxing training would give her an edge. She watched others struggle with 20 push-ups while her muscles could easily handle 50. "Taylor, your turn for the agility drills," Coach Barrett called. Jamila felt the eyes on her. Madison and her friends had positioned themselves to watch, clearly waiting for the new girl to either embarrass herself or show off. Neither option would serve her well. So Jamila did what any strategic fighter would do. She held back. She ran just fast enough to be average, completed just enough repetitions to blend in, breathed heavily as though tired when her lungs still had miles of capacity unused. "Decent showing, Taylor," Coach Barrett said, marking her clipboard. "Room for improvement." Madison's group exchanged disappointed glances. They'd been hoping for something, anything, to use against her. The bell rang, sending students flooding into hallways. Jamila consulted her map, locating her advanced chemistry classroom. As she rounded the corner, a solid wall of muscle collided with her. Books scattered across polished floors as she maintained her balance, a reflex any boxer would have. "Whoa, sorry about that," said the boy, his apology contradicted by the smirk he directed toward friends lingering nearby. His Letterman jacket identified him as clearly as a king's crown. Jason Reynolds, swimming champion, Madison's boyfriend, and, apparently, the next phase of whatever welcome committee they'd arranged. "My bad," he continued, not helping retrieve her scattered belongings. "Didn't see you there. Must be why they call it the hallway, not the seaway." His friends snickered on cue. Jamila gathered her books without response, keenly aware that reactions were being measured. As she reached for her physics textbook, a tiny splash of water from a nearby drinking fountain accidentally hit the page. More laughter. "I'm Jason. You must be the new transfer everyone's talking about." He extended a hand Jamila had no intention of taking. "I'm late for class," she replied simply, sidestepping his outstretched hand. Later, between classes, a girl with deep brown skin and closely cropped hair approached Jamila at her locker. The only other black student she'd seen in her grade level. "I'm Alicia," she said quietly. "Look, I should warn you. Madison decides who thrives and who suffers at Westfield. Whatever you do, don't stand out." Jamila studied her, recognizing the look of someone who'd already weathered storms. "Thanks for the advice." When Jason accidentally bumped her again after final bell, sending her notebooks flying toward a puddle from the afternoon rain, Jamila's boxer reflexes engaged before she could suppress them. Her hand shot out with precision, catching the notebook mere inches from water damage. What she hadn't noticed was the tall figure observing from the doorway of the weight room. Tyler, Madison's older brother, former state boxing champion. His eyes narrowed with professional recognition at the speed of her movement, the perfect balance she maintained, the controlled precision that came from only one kind of training. "Interesting," he murmured to himself, watching her walk away. Very interesting. Jamila's phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had added her to the Westfield Juniors group chat. For 3 hopeful seconds, she thought it might be a genuine inclusion. Then the messages began flowing. "Beach bonfire this Saturday. Everyone's invited. Can't wait. What time should we meet? Madison's dad is bringing the jet skis." Jamila scrolled through excited exchanges about an event she knew perfectly well she wasn't actually invited to. The addition to the chat wasn't an oversight. It was calculated. A window through which she could watch others' fun while understanding her place outside it. When she entered the cafeteria minutes later, conversations at Madison's table abruptly shifted, eyes darting toward her, then away. In history class, Mr. Winters announced their first assignment. Present a 2-minute speech about a historical figure who inspires you. Be prepared to explain their significance and lasting impact. When Jamila's turn came, she stepped to the front of the class, shoulders squared with quiet confidence. Clarissa Shields is the only boxer in history, male or female, to hold all 4 major world titles simultaneously in 2 weight classes, she began. Growing up in Flint, Michigan, she faced challenges that would have broken most people, but she channeled her energy into becoming one of the greatest boxers of all time. From the back corner, Madison whispered something to Zoe, triggering poorly concealed laughter. Mr. Winters cleared his throat but didn't intervene. "What makes Shields remarkable," Jamila continued, voice steady despite the disruption, "isn't just her athletic achievement, but her advocacy for equal pay and recognition for female athletes." Jason mimicked a boxing stance, throwing exaggerated punches in his seat to the amusement of his friends. The message was clear. Her hero was a joke to them. When Mr. Winters finally called for order, his reprimand carried the weightlessness of feigned authority. "Let's show proper respect for all presentations, please." The girls' locker room before gym class became another battleground. Jamila changed quickly, aware of the sideways glances at her athletic build. "Do you think they have special shampoo for that kind of hair?" Madison's voice carried deliberately as Jamila removed her headband, letting her natural curls frame her face. "It must be so difficult to manage." Another girl giggled. "Maybe that's why they keep it so short in those boxing matches. Can you imagine trying to fight with all that texture? Some people just don't fit the Westfield standard," Madison concluded, voice honeyed with false concern. "Not everyone can." In literature class, Mrs. Reynolds, Jason's mother, Jamila had learned, distributed essay assignments. When she reached Jamila's desk, she paused. "Alicia, you'll be analyzing 'Their Eyes Were Watching God.'" "I'm Jamila, ma'am. Alicia sits over there." Jamila pointed to the corner where the other black students sat. Mrs. Reynolds blinked, momentarily flustered. "Of course, my mistake." She consulted her clipboard. "Jamila, you'll also be analyzing 'Their Eyes Were Watching God.'" The only 2 black students in class. The only 2 assigned the same book. "I've already read it," Jamila said evenly. "I'd prefer The Great Gatsby, if that's an option." Mrs. Reynolds' smile tightened. "Let's stick with my original assignments." When the final bell rang, Jamila took the long route home, her path deliberately crossing by Wilson's community gym. The building was worn, paint peeling around windowsills, but the sounds emanating from inside pulled at something deep within her. The rhythmic thwack of gloves against heavy bags, the squeak of shoes pivoting on canvas, the coach's gravelly encouragement. She paused outside, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sweat that seeped through an open window. Inside this building, people were judged solely by their discipline, their work ethic, their heart. No invisible hierarchies, no unspoken rules of exclusion. Jamila stood transfixed by the contrast, the artificial shine of Westfield Academy versus the authentic grit of this place. One built on appearance, the other on substance. She lingered longer than intended, fingers unconsciously forming fists at her sides, body remembering what it felt like to belong somewhere honest. "Soon," she whispered to herself, reluctantly turning away. Just not yet. Madison stormed into the student lounge, her face a perfect mask of indignation as she slammed her designer bag onto the table where her friends waited. "You won't believe what just happened," she fumed, fishing out her phone. "My mother just texted me. That new head nurse at Westlake Memorial is implementing a staff restructuring that's threatening Mom's entire administrative department." Zoe leaned forward. "What new head nurse?" Madison's eyes narrowed as she pulled up a photo from the hospital's newsletter. Diane Taylor, recently relocated from Chicago. She paused for dramatic effect. "Mother of our very own new addition." The group collectively turned toward the cafeteria entrance where Jamila had just walked in. "No way," Jason said, suddenly more interested. "So her mom is the one causing trouble for your mom?" Madison's smile tightened. "Apparently, Nurse Taylor believes the hospital has misallocated resources and is prioritizing administrative comfort over patient care. Her air quotes dripped with disdain. Translation: My mother's department is getting budget cuts while nursing gets expanded. That explains how they afford Westfield tuition, Zoe mused. But why transfer mid-semester? Seems weird. Madison's expression shifted to one of calculated curiosity. Excellent question. I did some digging. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. My cousin goes to Riverside Prep in Chicago. I asked her about a Jamila Taylor. The group leaned in closer. Apparently, there was an incident last semester. Something about her attacking another student. Nothing on official records because Daddy had connections, but she was strongly encouraged to continue her education elsewhere. By lunch period, whispers of violent tendencies and anger management issues shadowed Jamila through the hallways. Students who might have offered tentative hellos now gave her a wide berth. The narrative had been masterfully crafted, not direct enough to be confronted, just specific enough to spread like wildfire. In biology, Mr. Harmon announced a group project. I'll give you 5 minutes to form teams of 4. The classroom erupted into movement, friends gravitating toward each other, familiar alliances forming. Jamila remained seated, watching the choreographed chaos, already knowing the outcome. 4 minutes later, she was the only student without a group. Mr. Harmon surveyed the room. Team 3 only has 3 people. Jamila, you'll join them. The reluctance from her assigned teammates was palpable. Throughout the planning session, her suggestions were met with minimal acknowledgement. When responsibilities were divided, she received the most tedious research component, clearly separated from the more creative aspects others claimed. We'll handle the presentation part, a girl named Rachel explained with practiced politeness. Since you're new and probably not familiar with our presentation style. As the bell rang, Jamila gathered her books, maintaining the composed expression that was becoming her armor at Westfield. Excuse me, is this seat taken? She looked up to find a lanky boy with an uncertain smile and a slight accent. His clothing, practical but unfashionable by Westfield standards, marked him as another outsider. Not at all, she replied, gesturing to the empty cafeteria chair. I'm Eli, exchange student from Sweden, he offered, extending his hand. First day, and already I've broken some unspoken rule about cafeteria seating, judging by those stares. Jamila couldn't help but smile. Jamila? And yes, apparently this section of the cafeteria might as well have an electric fence around it. Their conversation flowed easily, until Jamila noticed Madison's group watching them with predatory interest. By afternoon, Eli found his locker mysteriously jammed and his assigned lab partner suddenly sick. In sociology, Ms. Chen's discussion on social inequality sparked predictable statements about American meritocracy from privileged students. When Jamila offered statistics about structural barriers, Madison raised her hand. With all due respect, Madison said with rehearsed civility, some people just don't recognize that certain institutions have standards for a reason. Not every space is meant for everyone. The room tensed. The teacher, visibly uncomfortable, began to move on when a quiet voice interrupted. Would you care to elaborate on what standards you're referring to, Madison? Ms. Chen, the petite Asian teacher who rarely challenged classroom dynamics, had removed her glasses. The room fell silent. Historical patterns of exclusion don't persist accidentally, she continued, her calm voice carrying surprising authority. They're maintained through exactly the kind of coded language you just employed. Madison's cheeks flushed. I wasn't implying. Microaggressions are particularly effective precisely because they maintain plausible deniability, Ms. Chen continued. Perhaps that's something this class should explore further. As students filed out after class, Jamila caught Ms. Chen's eye. The slight nod they exchanged contained volumes of unspoken understanding. The Westfield Academy Library stood as a sanctuary of polished mahogany and leather-bound volumes, its high ceilings and ornate chandeliers more befitting a European manner than a high school study space. For students like Madison, it was simply another backdrop for social performance. For Jamila, it had become a refuge, particularly after hours when most students departed for sports practice or chauffeur-driven rides home. Mrs. Wallace, the elderly librarian with silver-rimmed glasses perpetually perched on her nose, had taken a quiet liking to Jamila's respectful demeanor and genuine interest in books that weren't part of assigned reading. This afternoon, she approached Jamila's corner table with unusual excitement. "I remembered our conversation about sports history," she whispered, placing a cloth-bound volume before Jamila. "This just arrived from an alumni donation, not even cataloged yet." Jamila's breath caught as she read the gold-embossed title, "Undefeated, Black Women in Boxing, 1900–2000. The cover featured a sepia photograph of Rudell Stitch, one of the pioneers whose story had inspired Jamila's own journey. "This is incredible," Jamila whispered, carefully opening the book to reveal photographs and accounts she'd only heard mentioned in passing. Women who had fought both literal and figurative battles for recognition in the sport she loved. "May I stay and read it?" Mrs. Wallace beamed. "Take your time. I'll be in the archives if you need me." An hour passed as Jamila lost herself in the pages, meticulously chronicling women whose struggles resonated deeply with her own. She didn't notice the library's emptiness until Madison's voice cut through the silence like a siren. "Well, isn't this cozy?" The new girl found her natural habitat. Madison stood flanked by Zoe and Rachel, their practice duffel bags suggesting they'd detoured from their usual post-school activities. Madison's eyes flicked to the book with calculated disinterest. Boxing? How unique. Her tone implied it was anything but. "Though I suppose everyone needs heroes they can relate to." Jamila closed the book, instinctively placing a protective hand over its cover. "Did you need something, Madison?" "Just meeting my brother." Madison circled the table, fingertips trailing across the polished wood. "Tyler has some student council files to pick up. Isn't it past regular library hours?" "Mrs. Wallace said I could stay." "Of course she did." Madison exchanged glances with her friends. "The staff here can be so accommodating to certain students. Probably afraid of complaints." Rachel snickered. "Special treatment." Jamila kept her expression neutral, years of boxing discipline controlling her response. "It's not special treatment to let someone read a book." "Is that what happened at your old school?" Madison asked, voice dripping with false concern. "Just reading a book when that incident occurred?" The reference to the fabricated story made Jamila's jaw tighten, but she remained silent. "Your silence is very telling." Madison set her designer coffee cup on the table, uncomfortably close to the book. Some people never learn their proper value. When Jamila didn't respond, Madison's smile thinned. She reached for her cup, but her movement was too theatrical, too deliberate. The cup tipped, dark liquid streaming directly onto the open pages of the rare volume. "Oops," Madison said with exaggerated dismay as coffee saturated the irreplaceable photographs and text. Jamila jumped up, desperately trying to save the pages, but the damage spread rapidly through the porous paper. "What is wrong with you?" Madison's eyes widened with practiced innocence. "It was an accident. You bumped the table." Before Jamila could respond, Mrs. Wallace emerged from the archives, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as she saw the sodden book. "What happened here?" she demanded, rushing to assess the damage. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Wallace," Madison said, voice trembling with convincing remorse. "I was just talking with Jamila, and she got upset when I mentioned her old school. She jumped up and knocked over my coffee." "That's not what happened," Jamila protested, anger finally breaking through her composure. Mrs. Wallace looked between them, confusion evident. "This book wasn't even in circulation yet. It's a valuable donation." "She's lying," Jamila insisted, hands stained with coffee as she tried to blot the pages. Madison's eyes welled with perfectly timed tears. "Why would I damage a library book on purpose?" "Because that's exactly what she did." The new voice came from the far corner of the library. Tyler Reynolds emerged from behind a bookshelf, his tall frame commanding immediate attention. His presence seemed to momentarily disrupt Madison's performance. "I saw everything, Mrs. Wallace," he continued, approaching the group. "My sister deliberately spilled her coffee on that book." Madison's expression flashed with genuine shock before hardening into cold fury. "You're taking her side? Against your own sister?" "I'm telling the truth," Tyler replied evenly, "and you know it." The siblings locked eyes in silent combat while Mrs. Wallace looked between them, clearly unaccustomed to questioning a Reynolds family member's account. "Principal Morris should hear about this," Mrs. Wallace finally said, reaching for the damaged book with gloved hands. As they all walked toward the administration office, Madison whispered to her brother, "You'll regret this betrayal." Tyler's expression remained impassive, but he glanced briefly at Jamila, their shared understanding requiring no words. This was merely the opening round. The aftermath of the library incident rippled through Westfield Academy like an invisible current. Wherever Jamila walked, conversations halted mid-sentence, replaced by stares and whispers that resumed the moment she passed. Despite Principal Morris ruling the coffee spill inconclusive, a diplomatic evasion that protected the Reynolds family name while offering Jamila no justice, everyone knew something significant had shifted in the school's social landscape. Someone had challenged Madison White's authority and hadn't immediately fallen. "She actually got Tyler to testify against his own sister," one girl whispered too loudly as Jamila passed. "I heard he's just mad because Madison told their parents about his secret girlfriend," another responded. Jason glared at Jamila with newfound intensity whenever they crossed paths, his previous casual intimidation evolving into something more targeted. Twice that week, his shoulder check in the hallway carried enough force to send her books flying. "Watch where you're going, troublemaker," he'd mutter, loud enough for witnesses. On Wednesday morning, Jamila made a decision. She arrived at lunch 15 minutes early, walked directly to the table Madison's group had declared their exclusive territory, and sat down. She arranged her lunch methodically: sandwich, apple, water bottle, then opened her book and began reading with deliberate calmness. The cafeteria fell silent when Madison and her entourage entered. All eyes tracked their progress toward their usual table, where they found an unexpected occupant. Madison stopped short. "I think you're confused about seating arrangements." Jamila looked up, expression neutral. "No table has assigned seating. I checked the student handbook." "Some things aren't written down," Zoe interjected. "They're just understood." "That's the problem with unwritten rules," Jamila replied evenly. "They only serve those who make them." Madison's perfectly maintained composure cracked slightly. "You think you're making some bold statement? This isn't a civil rights protest, it's a lunch table." "Then it shouldn't matter where I sit," Jamila said, returning to her book. The standoff lasted 30 excruciating seconds before Madison hissed, "Let's go. This table suddenly smells like desperation anyway." They relocated to another table, but the damage was done. Students had witnessed Madison retreat rather than escalate. A microscopic shift in the power dynamic, but significant nonetheless. The retaliation came swiftly. By afternoon, Jamila's gym locker combination mysteriously malfunctioned. Her assigned parking spot for driver's ed appeared freshly painted with "Reserved for faculty." In chemistry, her lab station was accidentally splashed with a solution that ruined her notes. Walking to English class, Jamila spotted Alicia ahead in the hallway. Their eyes met briefly before Alicia quickly looked away, increasing her pace to create distance between them. The message was clear. Association remained dangerous. Yet when Jamila opened her locker before final period, a folded note fluttered to the floor. "They did the same to me last year. I gave up, watching to see if you can hold out. Not alone, even when you feel that way." No signature, but the handwriting matched the musical notation Jamila had glimpsed on Alicia's notebook. In Friday's physical education class, Coach Barrett announced a month-long health project requiring teams of 4. Team captains will be our varsity athletes: Jason, Tyler, Emma, and Derek. One by one, students were selected. The process as transparently hierarchical as a feudal caste system. Jamila watched the available pool dwindle, mentally preparing herself to be chosen last or assigned to a team by default. Jason ostentatiously selected every member of the swimming team first. Emma and Derek filled their ranks with socially acceptable choices. With 8 students remaining, Tyler stepped forward. Jamila Taylor, The gymnasium fell silent. Jason shot his friend an incredulous look. Madison, watching from the bleachers during her free period, straightened suddenly. Jamila walked to Tyler's team, ignoring the whispers that followed. "Why would you pick her?" one of Tyler's friends muttered. Tyler's response, loud enough for nearby students to hear, was simple. "I respect people who maintain composure under pressure. She's got more discipline than half this school combined." Later, as students filed out, Madison cornered her brother in the hallway. "What exactly are you doing? First the library, now this?" "Maybe I'm just tired of watching your mean girl routine," Tyler replied. "Or maybe I just made a strategic choice for my project team." Madison's eyes narrowed. "Mom and Dad won't be pleased to hear you're undermining family loyalty." "Family loyalty doesn't mean supporting bad behavior," Tyler said, walking away. "Even a boxer knows which fights are worth picking." The gymnasium echoed with squeaking sneakers as students gathered for Coach Barrett's announcement. Fluorescent lights glinted off the polished floor where circles of blue tape had been meticulously placed at 6-foot intervals. "Listen up, everyone." Coach Barrett's voice boomed across the space. "For the next 3 weeks, we're implementing a special unit on physical conditioning and self-defense techniques. In today's world, knowing how to protect yourself is essential." Jamila stood at the back of the group, arms crossed loosely over her Westfield Academy PE uniform. The irony wasn't lost on her. After spending years perfecting the art of controlled combat, she'd now participate in a watered-down version while pretending to be a novice. "We'll start with basic stance and proper form," Coach Barrett continued. "Anyone here have experience with martial arts or combat sports who'd like to help demonstrate?" Jason's hand shot up before the question was fully asked. "I've taken some MMA classes at Apex Training Center." "Excellent," Coach Barrett nodded. "Come on up here, Reynolds." Jason strode to the front, shoulders back in a display of athletic confidence. He positioned himself beside Coach Barrett, scanning the crowd with a smirk that lingered when he spotted Jamila. "First, we'll demonstrate the proper defensive stance," Coach explained. "Mr. Reynolds here will show us how to position our bodies to maximize protection while maintaining mobility." Jason adopted a fighter's stance with practiced ease, though Jamila immediately noted his weight distribution was off and his guard left his ribs exposed, the hallmarks of someone who'd taken just enough classes to be dangerous to himself. "Now, I need a volunteer to practice with Jason." Coach Barrett looked around. "Any takers?" The gym fell silent as students shuffled backward, intimidated by Jason's physical presence and social status. "What about Taylor?" Madison's voice cut through the silence from where she observed from the bleachers. She mentioned being a boxing fan in history class. "Remember that presentation on Clarissa Shields?" All eyes turned to Jamila. "Great idea," Coach Barrett said. "Taylor, come on up." Jamila hesitated, recognizing the trap. Showed too much skill and she'd confirm suspicions about her boxing background. Showed too little, and Jason might exploit the opportunity to physically intimidate her under the guise of demonstration. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, approaching the center circle with measured steps. "Perfect," Coach Barrett said. "Jason will demonstrate a simple wrist grab defense. Jason, go ahead and take hold of her wrist. Gently, this is just a demonstration." Jason's fingers closed around Jamila's wrist with more pressure than necessary, his eyes challenging her. "Ready, Taylor?" Years of training screamed at Jamila to counter with any of a dozen effective moves. Instead, she allowed her body to remain stiff and awkward, deliberately adopting the posture of someone unfamiliar with physical confrontation. "When someone grabs your wrist," Coach Barrett explained, "you pivot your arm like this. Jason, show them, and then use your opponent's momentum against them." Jason demonstrated the move with exaggerated force, pulling Jamila slightly off balance. The message was clear in his eyes. He was establishing physical dominance in the most socially acceptable way possible. For 30 excruciating minutes, Jamila endured similar demonstrations, carefully maintaining the facade of average ability while Jason became increasingly aggressive in his demonstrations, always stopping just short of what would draw Coach Barrett's intervention. "You're a natural teacher, Reynolds," Coach Barrett commented, oblivious to the power play unfolding before him. As the class wrapped up, Coach Barrett made one final announcement that sent a jolt through Jamila's carefully maintained composure. "Before you go, exciting news! Westfield Academy will be hosting the Regional Youth Boxing Tournament next month as part of our new sports diversification initiative. We'll be welcoming competitors from across 3 states. Any students interested in volunteering should see me after class." Jamila's pulse quickened. The regional tournament. The one she'd been training for before transferring schools. The one where scouts from Olympic development programs often appeared. As students dispersed, she caught Tyler watching her reaction closely, his expression revealing he'd noticed the momentary flash of recognition in her eyes before she'd managed to conceal it. The tournament was coming to her. The only question was whether she would step into the ring or remain in the shadows. Jamila was collecting her gym bag when Tyler Reynolds approached, his movements casual but purposeful. The rest of the class had already filed out, leaving them alone in the equipment room. "That was some impressive restraint today," he said, leaning against the doorframe. Jamila kept her expression neutral. "I don't know what you mean." When Jason was demonstrating those holds, Tyler made air quotes with his fingers. "Your body tensed in all the right places. You were stopping yourself from countering." She zipped her bag with deliberate focus. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Tyler crossed his arms. "So you're just a fan of boxing? Not actually a practitioner? Why does it matter to you?" Jamila finally met his gaze directly. Tyler shrugged. "I respect skill, and I respect people who don't show off just because they can." He paused. "My dad pushed me into boxing when I was 9. State champion by 14. I recognize the way you move, the way you hold yourself. If you're trying to get me to confirm some theory for your sister's benefit, Madison and I don't exactly share information these days," Tyler interrupted. "Look, I'm just curious. You're either a boxer or you've had serious training in something similar." Jamila hoisted her bag over her shoulder. "I'm late for biology." Tyler didn't push further, but his knowing smile followed her out the door. That afternoon, storm clouds gathered over Westfield with unexpected ferocity. By dismissal time, lightning cracked across the darkened sky and rain fell in sheets. Students with cars or waiting drivers escaped quickly, while others huddled under the school's covered walkways. Jamila had planned to walk home as usual, but the deluge made that impossible. She'd waited 20 minutes when she realized her location, just 2 blocks from Wilson's community gym. Without better options, she made a dash through the downpour. The familiar bell jingled as Jamila pushed through the door, water streaming from her jacket. The gym's interior wrapped around her like an old memory. The smell of leather and sweat, the rhythmic sounds of speed bags and jump ropes, the grunts of exertion. "Can I help you, miss?" asked the front desk attendant. "Just waiting out the storm, if that's okay," Jamila replied, trying to appear like a random visitor rather than someone who belonged. "Make yourself comfortable. We've got towels in the back if you need one." Jamila thanked him and moved toward a bench along the wall, intending to remain inconspicuous. She was dabbing at her soaked textbooks when a gruff voice cut through the gym's ambient noise. "Well, I'll be, if it isn't the Illinois State Junior Champion herself." Jamila's head snapped up. Making his way across the gym floor was Samuel Wilson, the gym's owner and veteran trainer, his weathered face breaking into a wide grin of recognition. "Thought you looked familiar when you've been walking past my window every day," he continued, oblivious to her discomfort. "You're the girl who took the state championship last year with that beautiful counter right in the final round. Taylor, right? What brings you to our humble establishment? Heard you moved, but didn't know you'd landed in Westfield." Before Jamila could formulate a response, she noticed movement by the entrance. Eli, equally drenched, had just stepped inside seeking the same shelter. His expression shifted from surprise at seeing Jamila to fascination as he overheard Mr. Wilson's enthusiastic greeting. "State champion?" Eli repeated, approaching them with genuine interest. "Jamila, you're a boxing champion? That's amazing." Mr. Wilson continued, "One of the best junior talents I've seen in decades. That footwork in the Henderson match was poetry in motion." Jamila's carefully maintained separation between her worlds collapsed in an instant. "Mr. Wilson, please, you should train here while you're in town. the older man continued enthusiastically. Got some girls who could benefit from sparring with someone at your level. The following morning, Jamila knew something had changed the moment she stepped through Westfield's doors. Conversations halted. Eyes tracked her movement. Someone whispered "champ" as she passed. By third period, Eli found her at her locker, his expression a mixture of excitement and remorse. "Jamila, I'm so sorry," he said. "I mentioned to just one person about meeting you at the gym and what Mr. Wilson said. I thought it was cool, but now everyone's talking about it." "It's fine," she replied automatically, though it wasn't. "Why didn't you tell anyone you're a state boxing champion?" he asked. Before she could answer, she heard Madison's voice carrying down the hallway. Of course, she hid it. She was probably suspended from competition for excessive aggression. Why else would a champion suddenly stop competing and transfer schools mid-year? Madison locked eyes with Jamila across the corridor, her smile razor sharp. It all makes sense now. The anger issues, the violent outburst at her old school. She's not just difficult, she's dangerous. The narrative had shifted. Jamila was no longer just the outsider who didn't belong. She was the threat who'd concealed her true nature. The whispers transformed from "who does she think she is?" to "what might she do?" In that moment, Jamila understood. Her greatest strength had been weaponized against her. "I've confirmed it," Madison announced to her inner circle, waving her phone triumphantly in the student council meeting room. "Blake Coleman from the Regional Boxing Committee is my dad's golf buddy's son. He said there's definitely something suspicious about Jamila Taylor's competition history." Zoe leaned forward eagerly. "What did he find?" "Nothing specific yet," Madison admitted, "but he says there are irregularities worth investigating. Why else would a state champion suddenly stop competing and transfer schools?" Jason nodded. "Makes sense. Probably violated regulations and got banned. We can't just let someone with that kind of background represent Westfield at the tournament," Madison continued. "It could damage the school's reputation." "What are you suggesting?" Rachel asked. Madison's smile was razor thin. "I'm suggesting we protect our school's integrity. Blake sits on the eligibility committee for the regional tournament. He's promised to look into Taylor's application with extra scrutiny." 3 days later, Jamila stood before the athletics office bulletin board, staring at the posted tournament rosters. She scanned the list once, twice, then a third time before the reality sank in. Her name was missing. "Looking for something?" Coach Barrett approached, clipboard in hand. "I submitted my application for the regional tournament last week," Jamila explained. "But I'm not on the roster." Coach Barrett checked his records. "Taylor. Ah, yes. Your application was flagged by the committee. Something about irregularities in your competition history requiring additional verification. I have the email somewhere." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. "Here it is. The regional committee cannot process your application until they receive documentation clearing up discrepancies in your competitive standing. They sent this request to your previous gym in Chicago." "Discrepancies? That doesn't make sense. I was in good standing when I left Chicago." Coach Barrett shrugged sympathetically. "Tournament politics can be complicated. I'd suggest contacting your previous coach for documentation." Jamila nodded, but inside she connected the dots. Madison. Somehow, Madison had infiltrated the tournament committee. That evening, Jamila sat at the kitchen table pushing food around her plate while her mother reviewed patient charts. "You've been quiet tonight," Diane Taylor observed, looking up from her work. "Everything okay at school?" Jamila considered deflecting, then sighed. "Someone's spreading rumors that I was banned from boxing competitions. Now, my tournament application is being held up because of irregularities that don't exist." Her mother's face hardened slightly. "Let me guess. Madison White's handiwork? How did you know?" "Because her mother, Catherine White, is pulling the exact same tactics at the hospital." Diane put down her pen. "Ever since I implemented the new nursing protocols that reallocated resources from administrative luxuries to patient care, she's been questioning my certification, my experience, even my character." Jamila stared at her mother. "You never mentioned this. I didn't want to burden you. You were already adjusting to a new school." Diane reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand. Catherine even had the board review my hiring paperwork for irregularities. See, sound familiar? How are you handling it? Diane's smile was resilient. Documentation, transparency, and outperforming every expectation. The White family built their power on appearance and connections, but real authority comes from competence and integrity. Jamila squeezed her mother's hand. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. No, Diane agreed, and neither does the strength to stand against them. The next afternoon, Jamila was walking home when a silver BMW pulled alongside her. The window rolled down, revealing Tyler Reynolds. "Need a ride?" he offered. "I'm good, thanks." Jamila kept walking. Tyler drove slowly beside her. "I heard about your tournament application. That's Madison's doing." Jamila stopped. "Figured that out already." "I can help," Tyler said. "I still train at Wilson's 3 times a week. Off the radar." "Why would you help me?" Tyler parked the car and stepped out. "Because I recognize talent being wasted. Because I know what it's like to have boxing taken away by someone else's agenda." Something in his voice made Jamila pause. "What do you mean?" "Get in. I'll explain on the way to Wilson's." 20 minutes later, they stood in the empty community gym. Mr. Wilson had given them access to the back training room with a knowing nod. As Tyler wrapped his hands with practiced precision, he spoke. 3 years ago, I was ranked second nationally in my weight class. Olympic Development Program was scouting me. Jamila began warming up. "What happened?" "Semifinals of the state championship. I'd pulled my rotator cuff during training. Nothing serious, but enough that my doctor recommended withdrawing." Tyler's movements became mechanical as the memory surfaced. "My father was my coach. Also my biggest investor, as he liked to remind me." "He didn't let you withdraw," Jamila guessed. "He said champions push through pain. That real boxers don't quit." Tyler's jaw tightened. "I lost badly. Embarrassingly. The Olympic scout crossed my name off his list that night. But you could have recovered. Tried again." "My father couldn't handle the humiliation. He pulled all funding, said I'd proven myself unworthy of his investment." Tyler struck the heavy bag with sudden intensity. "I haven't competed since." Jamila absorbed this, seeing Tyler in a completely new light. "So why do you still train?" "Because boxing was never about my father's ambitions. It was about how it made me feel, disciplined, centered, capable." He steadied the bag for her. "Madison doesn't understand that about you either. She thinks she's taking away your glory by blocking the tournament. She doesn't realize she's just taking away your voice." Jamila threw her first combination, the bag absorbing her frustration. "So, what do? We train. We document the interference. And we find another way into that tournament." Tyler's smile was determined. "Madison controls the school channels, but Mr. Wilson has connections too. And, unlike our families, we actually understand what boxing is really about." For the first time since arriving at Westfield, Jamila felt the weight lifting. In this unexpected ally, she had found someone who truly understood both her worlds. "First things first," Tyler said, positioning himself as a coach. "Show me that state championship-winning right cross. Let's see what we're working with." Jamila's composition notebook transformed from a simple school supply into something more powerful, a detailed record of warfare. Each page documented dates, times, witnesses, and descriptions of incidents that individually might seem minor, but collectively revealed a pattern too deliberate to dismiss. April 15th, 10:32. AM lab partner switched last minute after Madison spoke to Mr. Harmon. Result: working alone on 2-person chemistry experiment. April the 16th, 2:15 p.m. Found gym clothes soaking wet in locker, though lock showed no signs of tampering. Witnesses: none, but Rachel and Zoe seen laughing nearby. April 16th, 3:40 p.m. Jason accidentally bumped into me at water fountain, causing water to spill on my presentation notes. Witnesses: 2 freshman students who quickly walked away. The methodical documentation was therapeutic, converting helpless frustration into actionable intelligence. What had once felt like isolated incidents now formed a comprehensive battle map. During lunch period, Eli slid into the seat across from her, glancing nervously over his shoulder before speaking. "I feel terrible about what happened," he admitted. "If I hadn't mentioned the boxing thing to anyone, it would have come out eventually," Jamila assured him. "Still, I want to help." He placed his camera on the table. "I'm in the photography club. We're supposed to be documenting school life for the yearbook. What if I document what's really happening?" Jamila looked at the professional-grade camera. "What are you suggesting? They're careful about leaving evidence, right? But if someone happened to be taking candid photos for a school project..." Eli's eyes had the gleam of someone eager to right a wrong. That afternoon, Mrs. Chen's sociology class provided another unexpected opportunity. "For your final project," Ms. Chen announced, "you'll be analyzing power dynamics in microcommunities." She wrote on the whiteboard, "Power, exclusion, and social capital in everyday environments." You'll identify a social system, document its hierarchies, and analyze how power is maintained, challenged, or transferred. This isn't just theoretical. I want real observations from environments you participate in. Her eyes met Jamila's briefly. Sometimes the most compelling sociological insights come from examining uncomfortable truths about spaces we inhabit daily. After class, Ms. Chen called Jamila aside. "Your perspective on this project could be particularly valuable, Miss Taylor." "You mean because I'm the current target of a systematic exclusion campaign?" Jamila asked bluntly. Ms. Chen's composed expression didn't waver. "I mean because you're observing with both outsider clarity and insider experience. That's rare." She lowered her voice. "Documentation matters, especially when power systems are designed to make incidents seem isolated or imagined." By week's end, Jamila had 8 pages of documented incidents. Eli had captured dozens of candid yearbook photos, showing deliberate exclusion in action, and her sociology project outline had received Ms. Chen's highest preliminary marks. But Madison's campaign escalated in response. Monday morning, Jamila found her locker defaced, not with obvious graffiti that would trigger immediate administrative response, but with more calculated messaging. The words "banned boxer" and "cheater" were written in erasable marker on the inside of her locker door, visible only to her, leaving no public evidence. The sabotage grew more sophisticated. Her sociology project notes disappeared from her laptop bag, only to reappear the next day with coffee stains rendering them nearly illegible. Her gym locker combination was changed again. An anonymous email questioned her athletic integrity, copied to several students and quickly deleted before administrators could trace it. After finding her boxing hand wraps cut into pieces inside her backpack, Jamila decided a direct approach was necessary. She found Madison between classes. "This needs to stop," Jamila said calmly, showing the damaged equipment. Madison's expression transformed instantly into practiced innocence as a teacher passed nearby. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, voice carrying just enough for witnesses. "Is something wrong with your things?" "You know exactly what's happening," Jamila pressed, maintaining composure. Madison's voice remained theatrically concerned. "Maybe you should be more careful with your belongings. Or maybe the pressure is getting to you. I hear competitive sports can be so stressful." The teacher moved on. Madison's facade dropped, her voice lowering to a whisper. "Nobody will believe you. My family built half the buildings on this campus. Your word against mine isn't even a contest." What Madison didn't notice was Eli seemingly adjusting his camera settings nearby, his directional microphone inconspicuously pointed toward their conversation. "Actually," Jamila replied, maintaining eye contact with Madison, "it's not just my word anymore." Madison's momentary confusion was captured perfectly in Eli's frame, a fleeting but genuine glimpse of uncertainty in her otherwise controlled performance. That evening, reviewing the audio with Eli and carefully labeling it for her sociology project on performative authority and plausible deniability in high school power structures, Jamila understood that the rules of engagement had fundamentally changed. This wasn't just resistance anymore. It was counterintelligence. The practice room's acoustics transformed Chopin's Nocturne into something almost tangible. notes hanging in the air like delicate crystal. Jamila had followed the music to its source, finding herself outside the music department's smallest rehearsal space. Through the narrow window, she saw Alicia, eyes closed, fingers moving across piano keys with practiced precision. When the piece ended, Jamila couldn't help applauding. Alicia startled, turning toward the door with momentary alarm that softened upon recognizing her audience. "Sorry," Jamila said, stepping into the room. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "It's fine." Alicia closed her sheet music. "I shouldn't be here anyway. This room is reserved for students in advanced music theory, which I dropped last semester." "That was beautiful. You're really talented." Alicia's laugh held no humor. "Was talented." Past tense. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them before Alicia spoke again. "I was concert pianist material. Had scholarships lined up at 3 conservatories." She traced a finger along the piano's edge. "Then I made the mistake of outplaying Madison at the winter showcase last year." "She plays piano too?" "Since age 4, according to her mother, who reminded everyone at every possible opportunity." Alicia's voice hardened. 2 weeks after I received the showcase's top recognition, rumors started about me cheating, practicing after hours when others couldn't, having a professional pianist secretly coaching me against competition rules. Jamila nodded, recognizing the pattern. "And the school did nothing?" Principal Morris called it a misunderstanding between students and suggested I should focus on academics rather than extracurriculars if the competition was affecting my well-being. "So, you quit?" "I stopped fighting." Alicia's fingers pressed silently against keys. "There's a difference. I still play, just not where anyone from Westfield can judge, criticize, or sabotage me." She met Jamila's gaze directly. "But you're still fighting. That's why I left you that note. Why approach me now? Your sociology project. People are talking about it. Not just about you documenting what's happening, but how you're framing it as a systematic issue." Alicia hesitated. "I saved everything from last year. Emails, texts, vandalized sheet music. If it helps your project, or anything else." The offer hung between them, representing more than evidence. It was alliance. Ms. Chen's classroom had become an unexpected sanctuary during lunch periods. What began as Jamila working alone on her sociology project had evolved into something resembling a support group. Today, 5 students huddled around her table. "It started after I questioned Madison's statistics in debate club," explained Xavier, a sophomore who'd transferred the previous year. "Suddenly, my research materials kept disappearing before presentations." Lily, a quiet senior, nodded. "They sabotaged my art portfolio after I received attention from a visiting college representative who Madison's mother had supposedly arranged to focus on her daughter." Each story followed the same blueprint. Success outside the approved hierarchy, followed by systematic undermining too calculated to be coincidental, yet too subtle for administrative action. "The methodology is consistent," Jamila noted, updating her project outline. "Isolation, reputation damage, resource denial, and institutional gaslighting. This isn't just a sociology project anymore," Xavier observed. "It's a case study in accountability." In the school gymnasium, Jason huddled with 3 teammates, voices low as they surveyed the equipment being assembled for the upcoming tournament. "All we need to do is switch the settings on the electronic scoring system during setup," Jason explained. "It'll register hits incorrectly. Nothing dangerous, just enough to ensure certain competitors don't advance beyond preliminary rounds." "Won't that affect everyone?" asked one teammate hesitantly. Jason smirked. "Only the rings that certain questionable competitors are assigned to. The tournament director lets my dad review assignments as a major sponsor. None of them noticed Eli positioned near the bleachers, directional microphone inconspicuously capturing every word while he pretended to photograph gymnasium architecture for the yearbook. The following afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived at Westfield Academy. Samuel Wilson's weathered appearance contrasted sharply with the school's polished environment as he inspected the boxing equipment being installed for the tournament. "Weight's off on these gloves," he muttered to Coach Barrett. and these headgear straps are too rigid for junior competition standards. Madison and several friends happened to pass through the gymnasium during this inspection, her voice carrying deliberately. I heard some competitors might have falsified their records to enter. So embarrassing for everyone involved. Mr. Wilson straightened at this, studying Madison before speaking loudly enough to ensure his voice carried. Been in boxing 43 years. Only seen one junior fighter from Illinois with the technical precision of Jamila Taylor. State champion with an undefeated record until her family relocated. Any suggestion otherwise is uninformed at best, deliberately misleading at worst. His pointed stare left no doubt about which category he placed Madison's comments. Later that week, Diane Taylor arrived at Westfield's administrative offices without appointment, professional folder in hand, and the composed determination that had earned her the head nurse position evident in every movement. "Principal Morris will see you now," the secretary announced after several pointed phone calls. Inside the office, Principal Morris's practiced smile faltered as Diane opened her folder. "These are medical evaluations documenting my daughter's symptoms of stress directly correlating with incidents of harassment at your school," she began without preamble, placing clinical reports on his desk. "And these are records of each incident we've reported to your administration, alongside the dismissive responses received." Principal Morris sighed. "Mrs. Taylor, teenage conflicts are complicated. This isn't conflict, it's targeted harassment with documented psychological impact," Diane interrupted. "As medical professionals, we're required to report patterns of harm affecting minors." His expression shifted. "Are you threatening to report our school? I'm offering you the professional courtesy of addressing this internally first. My daughter has compiled extensive documentation for her sociology project that demonstrates systematic targeting not just of her, but of multiple students who challenged certain social hierarchies." Principal Morris steepled his fingers. "It's difficult to prove who's truly responsible in these situations." "Interesting," Diane noted. "I haven't mentioned specific students, yet your response already focuses on protecting certain parties. That pattern of institutional protection is precisely what enables this behavior." She placed a final document on his desk, a formal request for investigation. "My question is simple. Do you value your school's actual safety or just its appearance of prestige? Because one sustains real education, the other merely protects certain families' influence." Principal Morris's uncomfortable silence provided its own answer. The Westfield Academy Gymnasium underwent a metamorphosis overnight. Gone was the sterile athletic space of physical education classes, replaced by a boxing arena complete with competition ring, judges' tables, and bleachers arranged for maximum visibility. Banners representing schools and community programs from 3 states hung along the walls. Colors, cultures, and communities rarely seen within Westfield's carefully curated environment. Principal Morris hovered near the entrance, alternating between welcoming distinguished visitors and throwing nervous glances at the increasingly diverse crowd filling his immaculately maintained facility. The regional tournament had brought an unprecedented mix of people onto the Westfield campus. Parents of all backgrounds, coaches from urban community programs, scouts from Olympic development initiatives, and boxing enthusiasts who defied easy socioeconomic categorization. Jamila watched from the warm-up area, simultaneously part of the event yet separate from it. After her application's mysterious irregularities had threatened her participation, Mr. Wilson had intervened with tournament officials. "The girl will represent Wilson Community Gym, not Westfield Academy," he had insisted, leveraging decades of respected involvement in regional boxing. Her record speaks for itself. Now, dressed in Wilson Gym's simple blue gear rather than Westfield's crisp white and gold, Jamila methodically wrapped her hands, focusing on the familiar ritual to center herself amidst the surrounding chaos. "Looks like quite the audience forming," Tyler observed, approaching with 2 water bottles. Though not competing, he'd volunteered as a tournament official, using his former champion status to secure a position overseeing equipment checks. Jamila nodded toward the bleachers where Madison and her entourage had claimed prime viewing positions. including my personal fan club. They're planning something, Tyler warned. Jason's been talking with teammates all morning, and Madison keeps checking her phone like she's coordinating something. I'm not surprised, Jamila replied, tightening her wraps. But between rounds is their problem. Inside the ring is mine. Her first match began 30 minutes later. As Jamila climbed through the ropes to face a competitor from Michigan, she noticed Madison distributing what appeared to be handwritten signs to friends scattered strategically throughout the audience. The referee called both boxers to center ring. "Clean fight, follow commands, protect yourselves at all times," he instructed, his voice nearly drowned out by a sudden coordinated disruption from the bleachers. "Check her for drugs," came a shout from Jason's section, followed by laughter. "Does suspended mean nothing anymore?" called another voice. The referee frowned, looking toward tournament officials who seemed equally confused by the outburst. Jamila's opponent glanced around uncertainly. What are they talking about? "Ignore it," Jamila advised, settling into her stance as the bell rang. Throughout the first round, the disruptions continued. Strategic comments during quiet moments, synchronized booing when Jamila landed effective combinations. Her focus narrowed, years of training converting external chaos into crystalline concentration. By the final round, her technical superiority was undeniable. The judges scored unanimously in her favor, advancing her to the semifinals scheduled for later that afternoon. "Impressive performance," Coach Barrett commented, surprising Jamila as she exited the ring. Though not officially her coach for this event, his assessment seemed genuine, especially with those distractions. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what's happening with certain students today," he added, lowering his voice, "but it's not representing our school values." The comment, the first acknowledgement from any Westfield authority that something inappropriate was occurring, caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Eli appeared, camera in hand. "I documented everything," he whispered. "Every coordinated disruption. Jason distributing printed instructions to different groups. It's all on record." As the tournament progressed, Jamila advanced through the quarterfinal with similar focus, earning grudging respect from spectators unaffiliated with Westfield. With each victory, the coordinated disruptions intensified but became increasingly ineffective against her composure. 30 minutes before her semifinal match, Jamila reached into her gym bag for her competition gloves, the specialized pair she'd trained with for years, perfectly molded to her hands. Her fingers found emptiness where the gloves should be. "Looking for these?" She turned to find Mr. Wilson holding her gloves, his weathered face grim. The leather was slashed along the padding, rendering them unusable and potentially dangerous. "They were found in the trash can by the men's locker room," he explained quietly. "Tournament officials have been notified." Jamila stared at her ruined equipment, the reality sinking in. Without proper gloves, she couldn't compete in the semifinal. "This is beyond school rivalries," Mr. Wilson continued. "This is sabotage of an athletic competition. Officials are investigating, but the semifinal starts in 20 minutes, Jamila finished, and finding regulation gloves that fit properly in that time is nearly impossible, Mr. Wilson confirmed. The commotion attracted attention from nearby competitors and coaches. From the corner of her eye, Jamila saw Madison watching from the doorway, satisfaction evident in her smile before she disappeared into the crowd. "Use these." Tyler appeared beside them, holding a pair of competition gloves, high-quality Reyes brand with custom padding, clearly expensive and well-maintained. "Your gloves?" Jamila asked, recognizing them from their training sessions. "They're regulation weight for your class." He handed them to her. "Slightly broken in, but should work." "Tyler, are you sure?" Mr. Wilson asked, understanding the significance. "Those are your championship gloves." "I'm sure," Tyler replied, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "A real boxer deserves proper equipment for a fair fight." Whispers spread through the warm-up area as Tyler, a Reynolds, brother of Madison, son of one of Westfield's most influential families, publicly offered his personal equipment to the outsider his sister had worked tirelessly to undermine. The symbolic weight of the gesture wasn't lost on anyone present, least of all Madison, who had returned with Jason and now stood frozen at the edge of the crowd. Her brother had just chosen sides in the most visible way possible. "Thank you," Jamila said, accepting the gloves. Tyler nodded. "Now go show everyone what real boxing looks like." As Jamila began wrapping her hands with the new gloves nearby, she noticed other competitors from various schools approaching, offering extra wraps, water bottles, and encouragement. What had begun as isolated resistance had transformed into something more powerful. Solidarity that crossed the very boundaries Westfield's elite had worked so diligently to maintain. The semifinal match ended with Jamila's hand raised in victory, Tyler's gloves gleaming under the gymnasium lights. What happened next defied the social physics of Westfield Academy. Scattered applause evolved into genuine cheers, not just from visitors but from Westfield students themselves. The invisible barrier had cracked. As Jamila exited the ring, a sophomore she'd never spoken to offered congratulations. Then another student and another, small gestures of recognition that collectively signaled a seismic shift. By the tournament schedule, Jamila had 3 hours before the final match, time enough for Madison to launch her desperate countermove. The finalist from Wilson Community Gym is required at the administration table, announced a tournament official over the PA system, voice tight with administrative discomfort. Jamila found Principal Morris, the tournament director, and Catherine White, Madison's mother, waiting in a makeshift office. Catherine's expression combined concern and indignation in proportions only achievable through years of practice. "Miss Taylor," the tournament director began awkwardly, "a concern has been raised about potential performance enhancement substances." Jamila's expression remained neutral. "You're suggesting I've used banned substances?" "We've received an anonymous tip with very specific allegations," Catherine interjected. "As a hospital administrator and tournament sponsor, I have a responsibility to ensure fair competition." "Interesting timing," Jamila observed, just before the final. "The integrity of this tournament is paramount," Catherine continued smoothly. "We're requesting an immediate screening." Principal Morris shifted uncomfortably. "It's highly irregular, but given the seriousness—" "I'll take any test required," Jamila interrupted. "And I'd like my mother present as a medical professional to observe proper protocol." 30 minutes later, Diane Taylor stood watch as a certified sports medicine physician collected samples. Her expression remained professionally composed, though her eyes communicated everything to her daughter: pride, anger, determination. Meanwhile, in the gymnasium, something extraordinary was unfolding. Eli, laptop open beside his camera equipment, had attracted a growing audience. On his screen played meticulously edited footage: Madison coordinating disruptions during matches, Jason vandalizing Jamila's gloves, multiple incidents of orchestrated exclusion throughout the school year. "It's all part of my documentary project," Eli explained to the gathered students and parents. Social dynamics and power structures at Westfield Academy. Alicia had joined him, sharing her own documented experiences. Xavier added his. Then Lily. The individual testimonies formed a damning composite. When Madison entered the gymnasium to check on the progress of her final sabotage attempt, she found herself walking into an unexpected narrative, one where she was no longer the author. "Madison!" called a student from the growing crowd. "Is it true you organized people to disrupt Jamila's matches?" Another voice. "Did you tell Jason to damage her equipment?" The questions continued, years of accumulated grievances finally finding voice. For the first time in her Westfield career, Madison White had no prepared response. "The test results are negative," the tournament physician announced, handing the report to the director. "No prohibited substances detected. Miss Taylor is cleared to compete." Catherine White's smile tightened. "Well, I'm certainly relieved. One can never be too careful. One can certainly be too calculated," Diane Taylor interrupted, fixing her hospital colleague with a level stare. "Using your position to pursue a personal vendetta against a teenage athlete, against my daughter, crosses professional and ethical boundaries. I was simply creating a paper trail," Diane finished. "As am I." She placed a folder on the table. Formal complaint to the hospital board detailing multiple instances of position abuse. The tournament director has been copied, as have several athletic governing bodies. Catherine's composure finally fractured. You have no idea who you're challenging. Actually, Diane replied calmly, that's precisely what my daughter and I understand perfectly. When Jamila entered the gymnasium for the final match, the atmosphere had transformed. Students who had once carefully avoided association now called her name. Classmates who had witnessed months of exclusion without intervention now wore hastily made signs supporting Taylor's technique. In the front row, Eli, Alicia, and a growing circle of allies watched expectantly. Behind them sat Diane Taylor beside, surprisingly, Coach Barrett, whose earlier blind eye had evidently gained new vision. Even Principal Morris observed with the wary attention of a man reassessing long-held assumptions. Madison was notably absent. The final match demanded everything Jamila possessed: technical skill, strategic thinking, and physical endurance against a worthy opponent from Ohio. Each round built upon the previous, scores remaining close as the boxers demonstrated the sport's true essence: disciplined conflict within respectful boundaries. In the final round, with seconds remaining, Jamila executed the counter-right that had won her the state championship. Perfect timing, impeccable technique. The crowd erupted as the judge's unanimous decision confirmed what everyone had witnessed: excellence that no amount of sabotage could diminish. Standing in the ring with the regional championship medal, Jamila was offered the microphone for the customary winner's statement. She looked around the gymnasium, at the diverse crowd, at her mother's proud tears, at Tyler's quiet acknowledgement, at the school that had tried to break her now witnessing her triumph. Boxing taught me that the strongest punch isn't always the most powerful, she began, her voice steady. It's the one delivered with precision, purpose, and principle. The same is true outside the ring. She gestured toward Eli and her allies. That's why today I'm announcing the formation of Standing Ground, a student-led initiative combining physical training with strategies for confronting bullying and exclusion. Because everyone deserves to know how to defend their dignity, their space, and their truth. From the back entrance, Madison watched silently as students, many once loyal to her hierarchical vision, approached Jamila with expressions of interest and support. Tyler joined his sister, following her gaze. Some fights you can't win, he said quietly. This isn't over, Madison replied, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. You're right, Tyler agreed. It's just beginning, but with different rules now. As Jamila descended from the ring, surrounded by a community that had formed despite every systematic effort to prevent it, she caught Madison's eye across the gymnasium. No words were exchanged, none needed. The true victory wasn't the medal or even the vindication. It was the creation of space where previously there had been only barriers, the transformation of isolation into alliance, and the simple, powerful recognition that systems persist only when unchallenged. The real triumph was standing your ground until others found the courage to stand beside you.